Good day folks, this is Christo Teron checking in for TradeTaxPlus Centre of Excellence. This is the first video for January 2018 questions that came through our platform. This specific question deals with section 18B of the VAT Act. Now, as you may remember, 18B says that if I've acquired residential property to make taxable supplies with it, in other words, I'm a developer and I'm selling the property, and I then subsequently rent out that property, then that property is used for non-taxable purposes and I'm deemed to have sold that property and must account for output tax on the market value of that property. Now, to assist property developers, section 18B was brought into the VAT Act, and what section 18B says is that you have essentially a 3-year period in which you can rent out that property and the tax is only payable, the output tax, at the end of the 3-year period. This section only applies or applied up to the end of December 2017. So as of the 1st of January 2018, it no longer applied, or it no longer applies at this point in time. And the question then really is, what about rental agreements we've entered into before the 1st of January 2018? Now, there's different views on that. My view, personally, is that section 18B is quite clear, that it firstly replaces 18.1. So 18.1 never applies to that specific transaction and can't apply to that going forward. It then replaces 18.1 in section 18.3, 18B3 of the VAT Act, a new deemed supply. So what that says is you are still deemed to have supplied the fixed property at that point in time, but the time of supply hasn't been determined yet. So the tax period to which it is attributable still has to be determined. So it says that will be within the next 3 years. So if you subsequently apply that property wholly for non-taxable purpose, let's say you sell that or you rent it out permanently in the interim, before the 3-year period, tax becomes payable. But also if you the 3-year period runs out, you pay it at the end of the 3-year period. So it's just a question of the tax period in which the tax is payable. The tax event has fully happened before 31st December 2017. Now, on that reading of the legislation, the fact that you've entered into an agreement before or on the 31st of December 2017 means you'll still have that protection for the remainder of the contract periods. That means you don't have to account for output tax immediately on 1 January 2018. This contention or this interpretation is supported by two facts. The one is the supply is absolute in terms of having been a deemed supply at the time you first rented out the property. So you can't have the same supply being taxed twice. So section 18.1 can't on the 1st of January 2018 assess the exact same amount to tax that's already been assessed to tax. So that's the first thing. You can't tax the same supply twice. The other argument in support of this is that if you should argue that all the tax becomes payable on the 1st of January 2018, that's effectively retrospective legislation, and we can't have retrospective legislation in terms of the Tax Acts unless there's a very specific reason for doing so. The last argument you would want to raise is, well, let's say we can argue that the section has ceased and doesn't apply anymore and doesn't apply to any previous supplies either, then that's two ways in which the legislation can be interpreted. Then the contra fiscum rule comes in. And contra fiscum says the legislation, if it's capable of being interpreted in two different ways, reasonably, then it must be interpreted in favor of the taxpayer. So I think the contra fiscum rule can also be used for that argument. Keep in mind there are other arguments and some articles have been put out with different views being expressed. We have asked SARS to give us a formal indication what their view is, and hopefully they'll give us some indication in the Tax Connect or the VAT Connect that comes out from time to time. But for the moment, we believe there's a convincing argument that there's no liability in terms of section 18.1 in respect of contracts that were entered into before 2018. So this is Christo Teron checking out for TradeTaxPlus Centre of Excellence.